Welcome back to another episode of the Breakneck Podcast. Tonight, we have a very special guest, Mark Heynen, who's worked with us in the past. And I say work with us, he's worked with Ian at a previous company. He's been the leadership founder of multiple successful companies. And so we're very excited to have him today. He is the founder of Knapsack, an AI company that's very interesting. And one of the reasons we really wanted him on is because he thinks about AI in a very different and very important way than most entrepreneurs. And there's a lot of people building on top of the kind of open cloud APIs for a lot of these services. But there's very good reason that most people can't use them, or very important industries can't use those services in that way. So he's a super deep thinker on this. We'll see if we get even to the ideas that he was talking about a year ago, but there's just so many levels of why security, privacy, latency, tons of things are going to make the current paradigm of AI probably not appropriate for tons of just high revenue, high importance applications. So that's hopefully the topic we're going to get to today, and hopefully we can hear a little bit more of your story, Mark. But we're super excited to have you on.
Yeah, sure. Well, great to be on here, guys. Always great to hang out. So maybe just quick background. I've started 5 company. Knapsack is my 5th company. I really started my first in my 20s in London, England. I was, actually helping a retailer figure out their e-commerce strategy, and ended up building a market research company, which I sold after 7 years, and then joined Google and Facebook, and then kept on starting companies. And I'm always interested in these access problems. I'm interested in situations where we have, people interested in using technology, and they're somehow structurally not able to get access to it. And so, I worked on drones. That's how Matty and I first started working together. Their construction mining people did not have access to real-time data because they did not have the hardware and software in place to get access to that, but they needed it. Most recently worked, co-founded PayJoy, which is a fintech that focuses on access to smartphones, specifically helping people in emerging markets who do not have credit be able to pay weekly or monthly for smartphones. And these access problems are great because there's latent demand. And once you unblock it, the company generally grows quite quickly. It also serves a social good because people are getting access to things that they generally need and want. And so at PayJoy, I was actually more recently helping the management team try to figure out how to use AI. And we realized there was this access problem in that PayJoy sits on a lot of very sensitive information. It's a licensed company. There are a lot of rules about what you can and cannot do with customer data. And a lot of the existing AI systems were not really compatible with those rules. There were no easy ways to just use the AI systems out of the box. And the customizations that were on offer to enable it to be compliant were quite expensive and quite complicated. And that smelled to me and Cooper, my co-founder, like an access problem. Like there was a situation where there was incredible demand for using AI within regulated industries on sensitive data, but the tools that were available were not great. And when I say not great, I want to be clear. There are some very sophisticated tools that the Fortune 500 are using right now and spending a lot of money on right now. And it seems from all of my investigations and conversations that a lot of that money is spent on consulting services that build last mile tools. I was at a dinner last week with the senior leadership of, some folks from Gemini, some folks from Microsoft working on Copilot. And my understanding is both Accenture and, of course, Microsoft and Google have forward deployed engineers that do a lot of this last mile coding. It works really great if you're willing to spend $1 million a year on your IT. For the vast majority of companies, that does not work. They just want something turnkey. And so we set out to solve that problem. We set out to make it easy to use safe and simple AI for regulated industries. Now, how do we do that? Well, the first layer of the problem is really a data problem. People need to have 100% clarity on where the data is going and how the data is stored, and it can't increase their risk exposure. And so we started by building a private note taker, which does not store any data on the cloud, our cloud or anyone else's cloud. It also allows users to delete the transcripts if they want to. And that is really important for people in financial services because they trade a lot of very sensitive information on these in their in-person meetings. At the same time, they're obligated to take copious notes. Financial advisors in particular are obligated to take really detailed notes. So that sets up this situation where they need something that is completely compliant. Um, and then we also then set up this thing called Knapsack Studio, which is an online application, then connects to your note taker, but also connects other data sources in from your CRM to your calendar to your email, really any data source you want. It's an MCP client for people who speak AI, but ultimately does not save that data within Knapsack. It saves all the data back into your existing systems. And so, we were talking a little bit before we kicked off and hit record that there will be a point at which OpenAI has a breach or a hack. So it's just a matter of time when you have large repositories of data, especially sensitive data, that there is a breach or a hack of some kind. And so our perspective on this is that we can create AI systems that give people the full benefit of AI without increasing their data risk and without increasing any kind of compliance risk.
Yeah, I have a quick story for you, just to kind of get a sense of the application. So somebody I know told me a funny story recently. They were in a team meeting for a large enterprise. Um, Somebody said at the end, two people said, "Oh, can you hang back? Let's have this conversation." It was two senior leaders, and so they ended up having this conversation, and it ended up going into HR stuff. They were just about to end the meeting, and they realized, "Oh crap! This was a team meeting with 15 people on it. Everybody's going to get the transcript."
Mm.
And so, the kind of the intro you gave to us was, hey, if you're running a large enterprise, this is an issue, but I think it's an issue for a bunch of us, right? I don't think we've even really thought about it. And so as you kind of laid it out in front of me, Mark, I'm like, holy crap, we kind of all need this. But I'd love to hear a little bit more, like, for the listeners who aren't running large enterprises, are there other sort of examples? Are there other ways where we should be thinking this is relevant to us?
Yeah, I think for anyone running a small, medium-sized business, I think the first question is, how do you want to use AI within your business? Usually, you want to start by actually connecting AI to your enterprise data in some way to be able to, interrogate it, do data retrieval, and also take action on your data. Often, what that involves is, using Gemini or Copilot or ChatGPT and running a bunch of connections in through that and starting to basically process the data through there. You very quickly run into a couple of problems. So first problem is the one I mentioned before, where you're actually aggregating a whole bunch of very sensitive data into a new system that you then have to keep track of. You need to include it in your compliance disclosures. And so that is a significant issue. The second is that you're creating a new dependency, system dependency. In some cases with Copilot or with Gemini, you're actually deepening your relationship with an existing software vendor where it might be hard to switch over into something else. So if you end up deciding you want to go from Microsoft to Google or vice versa as your underlying platform provider, that's going to be very challenging. In fact, right now, Copilot doesn't even support pulling any data from Google services, just to give you an example. And then the third problem you run into is the flexibility of being able to do anything. At this point, I don't think you can easily, within ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini, just add any MCP endpoint in and use it. I think ChatGPT claims you can do that, but I've tried with a couple of different endpoints and it simply doesn't work. And so you don't have the flexibility that you need as a small business. I run across a number of businesses that use, these second tier or even third tier CRMs that are, very custom built for their vertical, or maybe they're just more affordable, or there might be any number of reasons, right? And so this could be things like Pipedrive, right? And so how do you actually integrate that into your system? It's not available right now. It should be really straightforward. And so we've enabled that straight with Knapsack via MCP, a really easy MCP connection service.
This feels a lot like something we've already been through, which is we're kind of sleepwalking into AI. Oh, this is AI is neat. Oh, AI is useful for a few applications. Oh, we're piping all of our data through an AI. Now we have vendor lock-in, we have security breaches, we have data portability issues, we have privacy issues. It feels like what we already went through with cloud, and like social media had the same issues, right? Like, oh, I can't take my friend network between Apple's blocking me from sharing, or Facebook is doing all kinds of weird stuff to get access. You worked at these companies as they were navigating this, and now we're sleepwalking into the exact same set of problems. And I feel like you're the only one I've talked to that is like at all just cogent on this. Everybody else has a book, of business that relies on. Don't think about the fact that we now have access to stuff that you absolutely should not have given us, right? Like, but you're like, oh no, 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 this is bad, and you're talking with people who I think are the most urgent users of this, like financial firms and stuff, where they have to take notes, they want to use AI, but they have too much in their notes, and so what do they do? But I think it's something that is eventually just going to be, there's going to be some officer at corporations because, oh yeah, my AI discovered something in a record, somebody recorded a thing, and now it's being discovered in a court case or something like this. So everyone's going to have a chief make sure the AI doesn't get access to stuff officer. And like, you're the only one I've listened to. I'm sure you listen to other people and you're much more knowledgeable. Do you feel like it's like a Groundhog Day with people just ignoring obvious necessities?
I think all these things go in cycles and they're phases. So I think it always starts with convenience, where there's a cool tool. I just want to have the easiest thing possible that is the most convenient, easiest to use. And so in every wave of technology, that's the first thing. With cloud, Dropbox took off because it was literally just easier to use than anything else. And at a certain point, there's a desire for more control because people realize that they're losing control. They're using these tools a lot and they're losing control. And I think, we had some enterprise systems then roll out that offered more control within cloud, access control, auditability, et cetera. And then the stage after that, which I think is the stage we might be getting to with cloud and a stage we might get to with AI fairly soon, is where there's basically an urge for decentralization or, basically less consolidation, right? Where there's a concern that your data is too consolidated and you're, from an economic point of view, purely from a negotiating leverage point of view, you're too reliant on certain providers. And you need to have some level of autonomy, so you're not reliant from a system uptime point of view. You're not out. You're not in a situation where you can't negotiate because basically they have too much control and power. And then I think for the average user, there's probably just a concern about raw data privacy. Holy shit, I've shared way too much, and I don't know where it is. And when you get your 15th letter saying that there's been a breach, you start wondering, what's actually going to happen here. And more of our lives are moving online, and it's actually happening. It's still, increasing, right? And so we have this situation, I believe, where we're moving to the third phase, where people want a level of decentralization and lack of control. And I guess I'm particularly attuned to this because of my time in crypto. I did spend, a good 4 years, 2000 to 2024, thinking deeply about financial systems. I was at Stellar, which is a layer one blockchain, and thought about how we got to a level of concentration within financial services and how people could take more individual control over how they store their money. I think the other thing that has emerged is this concept of ephemeral compute, which I don't think anyone had really spent a lot of time on up until maybe a year or two ago.
Can you define ephemeral compute? Because I'm still
Yeah. I'll actually give you a really great example. When you take a flight and you hand them your ID to check you in or at security, they have a little sign that says, "We're going to take a photo of your ID, but we're going to delete it after we take the photo. We're just using it to verify." That's ephemeral compute. there's no reason why they should store your photo. I think if it was 10 years ago, they would be storing the photos just in case they might need it. Who knows? I think now they realize the users are very concerned about them storing the photos, and they don't want the risk. They're basically creating a huge honeypot for a hacker.
Well, there was an just because we're a podcast, we can be topical. There was an app that allowed people to. There was a girl version of the app and a boy version of the app, and it was the girl version was they could complain about, hey, this guy's no good, ladies watch out, and then the men, of course, made a second app that was hey, this lady, these ladies are no good, watch out for them. So it was kind of like an anti-dating app. But explain what happened. You're familiar.
Yeah, I mean, I think Teapot was the version of the app for women, so watch out for these guys. And I think people online took exception to it because they actually did ID verification to verify that you were in fact a woman using the app, and they decided to keep all that data. And so, yeah, someone hacked in and actually got access to the data and doxed a number of people, is my understanding. And so they created this. Yeah, they made the mistake of actually storing the data. There was no need for them to store the data. Once they verify you're a woman, they can just delete it. And then at that point, they have zero risk of someone hacking their server because there's literally nothing on the server. Or maybe there's like...
And there's 10 million versions of this where an AI is quite good at using inference to learn a fact that you then do not need the massive data set to validate. And it seems like there's 10 million versions of this, like HIPAA, financial, like you want to validate that the client needs X next financial services, some financial service in the future, that this needs to be sent, this form needs to be filed. But once you've inferred that, you can now kind of click that shut. And it seems like there should be an API that just makes sure that anytime something can be thrown out, you throw it out as quickly as possible if you need to. In the similar way that caching went from being, you would pay really smart engineers to figure out your caching paradigm, to caching just became like a background service that kind of existed everywhere. Does that really capture what you mean by ephemeral compute?
Yeah, I mean, ephemeral compute is simply the concept where if you're an application provider, just operate on a zero data retention policy. And once you get what you need from a data source, you don't need to store it anymore. If the user isn't asking you to store it, which in most cases they don't need you to store it, don't store it. So I think that's the fundamental concept of ephemeral compute, which is something that the application provider does. The user generally doesn't have anything to say about that, besides the fact they might want to look at, check if the application provider is using ephemeral compute. And then I actually think for the end user or for technology buyers, I do think we need to move beyond SOC 2. We just got our SOC 2. It was a painful process, always a painful process. Takes 6+ months. Ultimately, all it says is that we're really good at stewarding, at holding on to the data we hold on to. Now, we fortunately don't hold on to very much data, so it's a little easier for us. But really, there should be a SOC 3. There should be a SOC 3 which says, not only are we good at holding on to the data we hold on to, but also we don't actually ask for data we don't need, right? Or, ideally, we have zero data retention where we literally have the bare minimum required to run the business. I think that if Equifax and AT&T had that kind of policy, we would all be in much better shape.
I have two sci-fi concepts that I would like to get to before we end the episode, and we're already past. We never finish on time, so I want to go early. One is you are unique, like you said, in your knowledge both of kind of this access, the kind of legal requirements, but also your experience in crypto. What is the zero knowledge proof AI nexus? Like, are there AIs that can actually have zero knowledge about sensitive information or do inference in zero knowledge? Has that been an evolving thing?
I mean, there's some potential for some breakthroughs here. I think the biggest area where this could be helpful is in OAuth. So we're in OAuth 2. I imagine when we get to OAuth 3 or when the next version of OAuth comes out, the application provider is not holding on to a secret anymore to enable that. So OAuth was a breakthrough because the application provider doesn't hold on to the passwords, which was great. But the application provider still holds on to a secret. And, that is always a risk. I can imagine a situation where we use zero knowledge to cryptographically identify someone based on a subset of data without the application provider actually holding on to any secrets whatsoever. Right.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Is like, well, because AI agents also are a huge exploit. Like the fact that a lot of things that used to be kind of like you said, like, oh, we store a secret, but that's not such a big deal. Well, actually, if you have a dump of that, and then you have all these agents that can go back and reconstruct, like, obviously login is one application. Little bit of data getting leaked maybe wasn't a big issue before. Now with agents, it's even easier for that data to be used against you. Second sci-fi question, and then Ian, if you have questions, but I'm going to dominate it for a moment. You've talked about something that I thought was super important and is maybe a couple years out, which is having multiple layers of AI, some local, some in the cloud, and essentially using that AI to figure out and audit your data before it leaves your local environment. And there's been a new release this week from OpenAI, a gigantic, it's 120 billion parameters, which isn't the biggest model, but it has high performance. People have been running it locally on their M3s and M4s, MacBooks with lots of inference capabilities. Very slow, probably not ready for replacing your workflows for like Cursor or something like that. But what do you see coming in terms of having multiple stages of AI to reduce risk? Because you're the only person I've heard talk about this, so I wanted to kind of like get your perspective on it.
Yeah, I think, well, first I'll say the OpenAI, I think, is a pretty big breakthrough. I think there's generally been a trade-off with local models in that you could have private or functional, but you can't have both. And here there's the possibility you can have both, which I think is great. And so I think now we just need compute to get to the next level where it's actually fast, where you can actually have fast, functional, and private. That would be amazing. I think that the future will be that people will be running more of this on device as they need to, and then reaching for the cloud as they need to. And I think that'll really be driven by people's need for control, especially when it comes to certain data sets. I think navigational searches, looking at public information, that's always going to be generally cloud-based. I don't think that's going to change. You need real-time information. That's fine. I think when it comes to your personal data, I think there is always going to be a need for and a desire for something happening more locally. And, we've seen this before where you have with mobile applications, there was a desire from a latency point of view to have stuff running locally. And then in some cases, people wanted to store things locally, there's a desire for native applications. I think we're going to see a similar thing here with AI where latency will actually be, it'll be faster locally over time because you don't need to do the round trip on the cloud. The kicker will be the privacy piece, right? That it'll feel safer and more secure. My prediction is that over the next year, we will start seeing some of these applications grow and get some critical mass of users. We've had Google already rolled out a application that allows on-device inference for Android. It's open source. The application is open source. Obviously, the model itself is open source as well, open weights. So I think it's just a matter of time until the capabilities get to the point where people can actually use them on a regular basis. And then you need founders to build amazing experiences. I do think finance will be one of the first that'll have a critical mass product because no one's going to want to upload their social security numbers to these tools, right? And so if you're trying to get help in your taxes, I'm sure some people are using ChatGPT for this. I'll just take this opportunity to say, please don't do that if you're thinking about doing that. Ultimately, those social security numbers are stored forever. They could come out in training. You never know. Maybe you ticked in ChatGPT, don't train on my data. Maybe you didn't. I think ultimately it'll be easier for people to then just tick the private box on the application and start using it locally, and they won't see any difference in performance.
Yeah, it's something that might even feel hidden for a while. Do you remember the solid gold Magikarp incident?
No, what is that?
Well, when they were training, there were certain terms that were basically just kind of glitches in the matrix. Given the way it was trained, when you would use these terms, they would be returned like much more frequently. They were statistically like odd. They had kind of these Hapax legomenon of the data set. And so solid gold Magikarp would just break. If you use that word, it would break like GPT-3. It's a very weird word. I think it was somebody's Reddit ID, and they had trained on so much Reddit data that had basically like become this little vortex in the training set that could not be extricated. My point is that there'll be statistical phenomenon in this data, even if it's like, oh, it's been expunged. It's like, if you use a whole set of terms, does it change the inference? And once these models are open weight, someone could go sit there and just mine and perhaps recover sensitive data. I'm just saying, like, it's not as hidden as we want, in the same way that, like, oh, no one would ever, break my Roman general's hash. It's like, no, like, it's actually, you take like what was the thing that they did it in World War II where they broke Enigma. It's like, once you apply statistical models on top of it, things that you thought were hidden become just plain as day. And I think no one has actually attacked especially gigantic, if OpenAI is training on your data and then they release an open model, like, who knows what can be extracted from that with techniques that haven't been popularized yet.
I hadn't even thought about that.
Great. I have completely satisfied for the moment my sci-fi, but thank you, Mark, because I know you're thinking like just years in the future on this.
I've never heard that he's satisfied all his sci-fi curiosity. So, Mark, you and I have about 30 seconds here before he comes up with something else. I'm going to bring it back to reality. We have, we have a bunch of different AI folks listening in, a bunch of founders and entrepreneurs, and I'm really intrigued in the context of, or from the perspective of, you're out here selling something new. Something that, Matt and I spent a lot of time in AI, and you're really kind of opening our eyes. And so I'm really intrigued. What level of maturity do you meet in the market? Are you meeting people who already have a title, who are responsible for thinking about these things? Or maybe that's not the case. And how is that kind of affecting the way you sell this?
I think it's important in any startup to find your initial users, your ICP, and to build around them. And otherwise, generally startups don't work. I think what we found is that financial services has a good set of ICPs, and that there are people who have to think a lot about where their data goes, and they're required to from a compliance point of view. And so, I think within financial services, we're actually running into a number of people who want this, and especially I would say small, medium-sized businesses within that, within financial services. They still have the compliance burden. They don't have the budget to buy something that is, $1 million a year, or even, usually $300,000 a year. And so they're happy to use something self-serve that meets their criteria. And I've been pretty impressed that those people are generally quite smart about what's going on with AI. They're somewhat frustrated by the limitations. So I think generally people are frustrated by, well, first of all, Google's not really a factor in often. Gemini is not really something that comes up, because when people in financial services love Excel, they love Microsoft. They usually have been in Microsoft world for so long. And so then you're really talking about Copilot. Copilot's done a great job at showing what's possible with AI, but also failing spectacularly at a lot of basic queries, and not really being very functional. And so that's actually a net positive, I would say, for most founders who are trying to build in this space. And then you get into ChatGPT, and the other Perplexity, the other people out there, and there I think I'm quite impressed with the level of sophistication of just the average, business owner or IT person within a medium-sized company. They really understand where ChatGPT is going. They understand the limitations of what they can do right now within what ChatGPT offers. They know what they want. Right before this call, I had someone say, "Hey, I want a note taker that doesn't save my transcripts. Can you deliver that?" Right? It's not that they don't know what they want. They know what they want. They just know very clearly that the existing solutions don't offer it. I think we are at early, though. So to your point about whether the market's ready, we're definitely early. We're definitely on the leading edge of this thing. It's where I love to be. But I think more and more awareness is sort of propagating out. And there are a lot of people who are just blocked and they've given up looking for something, and they just don't use AI very much outside of just public queries the same they would use Google search. They don't use AI with their data because they've given up finding a compliant solution. As we grow, I think we'll come across more and more of those people.
Well, what do you think from a market perspective? What might be the inflection points where you might say to yourself, oh, yeah, something's happening here? And like a common one is when the category you're in has a name, right? But are there certain inflection points where you say, now things are taking off because I'm seeing this happening?
Yeah, I think one is, we coined the term private AI. If private AI becomes something people ask for because it is the best way to run AI, that would be great. That'd be a great inflection point. I think the other inflection point is where the SaaS applications that you use day in and day out do this themselves.
We just need people to
yeah.
start asking for SOC 3.
Yes, right. Yeah, if SOC 3 becomes a thing, we're
SOC
there.
3, yeah. Like, reminds me of this something about Mary, like 6-minute abs. What? No, 7-minute abs. um,
I have one more question. You made me just think of a key functional consideration with AI nowadays, well, and in the future, I think, is the question of memory.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean it in a kind of in a positive sense. It's helpful for AI to have memory. Is that like functionally, that's got to be a challenge with ephemeral compute?
Yeah, we thought a lot about this because memory is so useful. And so our take on that is that people should be able to, have their memories be used with AI, but they should have a lot more control of what that memory is. And in fact, the memory should be spanning all of your applications, not just that one application you're in. And so we actually created something called Knapsack Memory, which basically is an MCP endpoint that can save your memories from all your different AI applications, and then you can actually bring it to the other applications. So, a lot of times people say, I have trouble switching from ChatGPT to Claude because ChatGPT has all my context, right? Well, with Knapsack Memory, you can actually include that as an endpoint, have those memories saved to Knapsack. You have full control. You can look through, delete as you see fit, and you can bring those memories to another application if you want to. And then that means, first of all, it means you are not wedded to any single application. You can delete your whole history on ChatGPT if you're worried from a data security point of view. The second thing it means is you have a very rich multi-platform set of memories you can bring to any application you use.
Yeah, and that kind of seems like the type of thing where you don't need very fast inference and is amenable to local storage as well. Is if you could have, your core memories, like your lockbox of memories and multiple tiers of security that don't have the same performance requirements, but you could have it ephemeral or stored in a more air-gapped way.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So, gentlemen, as always, we've run over, but Mark, we do like to do something to kind of wrap up, land the episode, so to speak, which is stuff is happening so quickly. We see stuff coming across our desks every week and something grabs our attention. So the kind of the open question is there anything this week that has caught your attention related to what you're doing or beyond that? And if you're ready to go, jump in. I have one. I don't know. Matt should have one. He knows it happens at the end of every episode.
I was prepared this. This is an easy week for me personally.
All right. Well, why don't you go first, Matt?
Well, look, I'll do the easy one. Obviously, ChatGPT 5 was released last Thursday or Friday, something like that. We're recording on Monday. A few things. It's not that big a jump from 03 or 03 Pro, but it is better, I think. I mean, like I got different results. I'm very happy with my little test set I run myself. And second thing is they deprecated immediately all the old models, which is a very consumer move. Enterprises generally tend to maintain legacy APIs like well beyond, because they want to encourage, like Microsoft very famously has backward compatibility to like, I don't know, like in 1980, like you can run a 1980 application on them. And so it just tends to feel that OpenAI has made big decisions about maintaining their lead in consumer. And I think they're starting to take moves that are making them less and less enterprise friendly, and they may perhaps have to choose to be a consumer company or primarily a consumer company.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think my takeaway from ChatGPT 5 is that ChatGPT is now a consumer company where the app is actually more important than the models. And in fact, this might be the last numbered version release we get. I actually think if ChatGPT swapped out Anthropic for their backend, basically they just started using Claude models, people would not alter their behavior whatsoever, right? Like I think people just have a certain brand association at this point. I also thought it was interesting that the poly market flipped between Google and ChatGPT when they were launched. People now are a lot more bullish about Google having the next revolutionary model. So people seem to be a little disappointed with GPT-5. I think in terms of the things that are happening, I went to a great talk last week by the guy who created the term prompt injection. So this is a blogger, and his name is Simon Wilson. And he created a new term called lethal trifecta. But he thinks now with MCPs, there's a lethal trifecta, which is, basically if something has access to private data, has exposure to untrusted content, and has the ability to externally communicate, it's an agent that could possibly create a lot of damage. And so he wrote a blog post about this.
Yeah, I saw one today. It was like someone could put a malicious Jira ticket in to your bug solver, and it would leak all your local credentials because the agent had access to your local credential, had access to untrusted Jira content that was not sanitized, and had full autonomy. And so the Jira ticket would essentially cause the agent to release all of your local keys to the internet, which I think is the lethal. That's kind of like my understanding that lethal trajectory.
So my one was Genie 3 and the world model. I don't know if you guys saw that. I haven't
Yeah,
spent too
that
much
was
time
interesting.
with it, but Matt knows because I've talked about it a lot. I'm really intrigued around the physical world. We worked in drones before, so that was kind of another, technology meets the physical world. But it's actually making me think as we talk through this, are we at a plateau point with LLMs? Right? It's marginally better. It was actually kind of a productization decision more than anything else, like bundle it this way now and get rid of the old one. What's our personal forecast here on LLMs if there were to be a ChatGPT 6?
I think I always kind of like reflect on the drone situation, which was there was this huge burst of drone company, and actually most everybody else just cratered in that market. And I think what happened was my theory of this is that there was a huge catch up period where a new technology, which was cell phones, suddenly enabled drones. But it was all this investment from multi-billion-dollar companies into cell phones. You took all the accelerometers and local compute and small motors, and you made this new category of product, which was drones, which felt like it had this incredible upward trajectory. But in fact, what was happening was it was just catch up. And is AI reaching that point where there's only so many meaningful distinctions in the data set on the internet? You took hundreds of years of written text in the human corpus, you ingested them all at once, and it went, and then now we've hit all of that, and it's like, how are you going to continue? You're going to do robotics, and you're going to create new data sets, and you're going to create emergent science and stuff like that. But it's not going to be something like you just look at the old data set.
Yeah, at least written. I mean, that's why the world models are so interesting.
Yeah. I
Because
think that's the thing about world
the
models and
experienced
robotics.
world,
Yeah, the world models will be great for training for robotics. I'm pretty bullish on robotics and bullish on the application layer. I think we still haven't done enough innovation on the application layer for people using the existing capabilities. I still think we haven't tapped out the existing capabilities of LLMs.
From your mouth to God's ears. All right. Well, Mark, we've kept you well beyond what was reasonable, and we've loved every moment. Thank you for coming on. Always exciting to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks, guys.
Great. Thanks you, Mark. All right, let's
Bye-bye.
wrap it there.